Hello climbers and welcome to Season 4 of Climbing Mount CMMC. Hello climbers and welcome back to another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC, the podcast. My name is Kaleigh Floyd and this is Bobby Guerra, and we are a part of an MSP called Axiom that is CMMC Level 2 certified. And this is the final episode of Season 4 of Climbing Mount CMMC. Wow, it's very bittersweet that it's coming to a close, but we're very excited to talk about something that is near and dear to our hearts. And it's for you MSPs out there that are hopefully listening to
our fellow brethren in arms.
That are trying to decide what they want to do with this CMMC thing. Honestly, in my opinion, though, if you are an MSP that is down the road of CMMC and have already started their climb towards either a level 2 certification yourself, or you have a client that you're working through their level 2 certification, I think you can get a lot from the perspective of this podcast episode. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through, honestly, I think what Bobby wished he would have known before starting off this journey. Just a high level view of like when you're choosing to go all in or more casual for CMMC, and we'll explain what that means. You know, what does that look like and what hurdles are you going to have to jump? So we want to talk about those specific hurdles and what you can look for in your journey and look to maybe try to avoid, or also some things that you're going to have to face head on and we can't change that. Right. But hopefully we can prepare you for a little bit.
And it's not to say that there aren't other paths you can do. I mean, quite frankly, the path that we're going to outline is not the one that we took necessarily.
Some
right?
of it is recommendations.
Yeah, some of it we did kind of find our way through it to be there, but this is based on our experience of going through it. Like, okay, now that I know what I know, like, how would I do this differently and how would we go at it? And what would, maybe be a good determining factor once you start to look at this, go, well, maybe this isn't something I want to do. Okay, fine. Then, you made the right choice, but maybe you're like, that sounds great. I want more of that. Now this helps me have a better idea of how we would want to attack it.
Yes.
But mileage varies. Everybody's different. And you might think we're totally crazy and you're going to do it a completely different way. And if you succeed at doing it, hey, great.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be good to maybe start off this episode with talking a little bit about where we came from, because some people might not know this that's listening to the podcast. But for us, we didn't grow up in the government space. We grew up, in the MSP community. Bobby was once a trunk slammer himself that went
proud about it.
Proud about it.
Proud heritage trunk slammer right here. Who has two thumbs and slammed a trunk to run there like this guy.
Well, while your wife made the printout invoices for your clients,
and
right?
Like 3 copies, like the Monsters Inc. thing where it's like, whoa, that's what Puce looks like when he's like trying to take the copies and stuff. Like we had that. Like we started in 2002, so you had like multiple copies we had to write. One we'd leave with the client, one we'd keep for our records, and one Judy would do to put it in QuickBooks.
Right.
And, we've evolved quite a bit since those days.
We don't do that anymore.
No.
I'm not saying that we do that anymore. But I think that hopefully it's a helpful perspective for some people that are listening to this that are like, I don't even really know this area. Because CMMC can be a real punch in the face to people, especially when they're not used to handling government contractors and what that looks like. There's a lot of things that pop up that you're not used to when it comes to this space and working in the DIB. So, we've already seen a lot, and we've been working in it for like 5 years max, It's crazy what we've learned in just that amount of time.
It's more than a certification, right?
Yeah.
CMMC is just a validation of what the client's supposed to have already been doing all along.
Right.
So understanding the history, understanding how the ecosystem works. A lot of times I think MSPs like us that we're coming from the commercial side, that this is what we focus on, they just think like it's another vertical, another solution, it's another tool, something we can just do that we can make money, and it's not it. It could be nothing further from the truth. Yeah. Like that is not that is not a thing for CMMC. Like CMMC is like its own creature. The waters are extremely deep. The compliance requirements are very, very high. It will push you as an MSP well beyond anything you have ever done if you want to go into that space. So you just really need to understand, like, that's the tiger you have by the tail if that's what you want to do.
Right. So I want to talk first about what I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, which was the difference between being casually a part of CMMC and then being all in. So can you describe, when you said that to me, what exactly you meant by that?
Yeah, the belief, I think it's steeped in kind of what I just mentioned, the belief that it's something that you can do casually. You don't have to really commit to the level that you're going to need to in order for you to get the clients where they have to have the level 2 requirements. If that's what you believe, I mean, that's just not true. The commitment has to be at a level that you just is just not what most traditional MSPs understand, because that's what I grew up in. That's what I thought when I first tried to do it. And this would be an example of where we tried to think that we would be smarter than other people in the industry, and then learned over the years, now we got to fully commit if we're going to do this thing. Looking back, to answer your question very specifically, is it has shown me that if an MSP wants to get into this space, they have a crisis of decision. Do they want to be a casual MSP that works in the space, or do they want to have like this become a vertical of growth that they're going to scale out?
Yeah.
And you really need to understand that right off the break, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself meandering the hallways of decisions and find yourself not really finding a good purpose of where you're at. And it's just not going to be healthy for your client. It's not going to be healthy for you. So what do I mean by that? So if you're going to handle it casually, what I mean is you can move, and it's relatively not that complicated once you understand the controls and what's required for CMMC, to move 1 or 2 clients through it as an MSP supporting them. It'll be difficult, but nowhere at the level of difficulty if you want to do it at a scaled process. So that's where you have that crisis decision, is trying to understand, because you have to have the right people and resources. You have to have, your team's going to have to get a lot of them will have to get certified to be able to understand how to do what they're doing. You got to have investment in time and structure. It's so much more complicated when you want to do something at scale like that. And it's effectively building like a separate company, because that company is going to have to be able to support that scale, because the way you support your commercial clients and the way you have to support your CMMC clients are not the same. They will not be the same. Don't think you can do it that way. If you do, you have figured out how to turn water into gold. Okay. No one's been able to do that yet. Just
not even Jesus.
Yeah, because he turned it into wine, which that makes sense, right? So don't fall into that trap believing that you can do it. Just let that go, dude. Just move on, right? You got to make the decision. If you're going to go all in, you're going to have another tenant and other things. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but you have to try to make that decision of whether you're going to be all in or you're going to do it more casually. Because you might have 1 or 2 clients that you just passionately have a relationship with and love, and you want to support them. It won't be easy. It'll be a journey for both of you to go through, and you could do 1 or 2. But then what I've seen people try to do is they'll say, well, but then we'll make the decision if we want to fully commit. What's going to end up happening then is those 2 or 3 clients are going to be the ones that you literally hate, because they won't be how you want to do it the right way. Moving forward, right? Because
the pricing scale is going to be off.
Right. All of that's going to be wrong.
Capabilities are going to be off. The tools could even be off, and you might have to go back and then change all of your tools.
Yep.
Yeah. Not a fun day.
So that's the first thing, is just make that decision right then. Like that's like how you're going to go. And then whichever way is fine. Just pick one and find the lane, own it, and swim in it as best you can.
And I'm going to be honest, I've talked to many MSPs and owners of other MSPs that are even much larger than we are, and maybe even have more, bandwidth financially and time-wise than we did. And I explained to them how we did and what we had to do to get ready. By the end of that, they were like, yeah, that client's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so, it really sucks I'm just, giving the MSPs that are listening to this a perspective. It really sucks for the client, for you to say that you think you can do this because you think you can do this, or that you even want to do this as an MSP, and then you get them like halfway, or even you've been doing it for a year with them, and then you finally decide, yeah, we actually can't do this, and they've just wasted a whole year that they really didn't even have to begin with, And so it's it's so, so unfortunate for the client as well. It's trying to, the OSC that's trying to get CMMC level 2 certified. So, just keep that in mind. If you do really care about those clients, like what Bobby is saying, like care about them enough to go through the headache of figuring out CMMC as an MSP just for those two clients, you actually might end up caring enough about them to realize, like, I don't want to commit to this fully, so I should probably give them to somebody that does.
Well, and I think the part of the reason why people fall into this trap as MSP owners and as well as consultants that do this is they feel that probably close enough is going to be okay, right? Almost is good enough. And for CMMC, I can't tell you how many times we've talked with people that have done consulting or trying to move through it, and they don't even understand how the grading system, the scoring system inside CMMC works.
You can get negatives?
Yeah, so the reality is you have to get 100 in order for you to pass. Not an A, not a B minus,
perfect score.
100%. If you do not pass 100% of it, you fail, go back to the beginning. Yeah. That's it. And when you wrap your head around what I just said, you're like, oh snap. So the level of requirement and dedication in order for you to have a perfect score, right? So just think about anything you do as an MSP, and it has to be perfect. My patching has to be perfect within the parameters you've defined. We're going to take care of highs at this level, mediums at this level, perfect. That's it. That's the only answer. You're like, well, but we're going to have, that's it. No, perfect. And when you start to realize that, you realize, oh my gosh, the stakes are considerably higher. And that's because they are.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I want to go into our next discussion. So when you decide that you're all in, so let's say you've still made it to this part of the episode and you're like, I want to keep listening. I haven't been scared yet.
Right. Yeah, that sounds great. Sign me up.
The next part is education. Now, bringing in the education of your team so that they can execute the rest of this that we're about to talk about. So from our perspective, Bobby, you were the person that got the education first, and then you realized something very seriously, which was, I cannot do this alone. Once you had created a little bit of an SSP and you're like, what the crap have I got myself into kind of thing, then Adam came along, right, and became your helper. But it was a lot for you to sort of learn this whole idea of CMMC, NIST 800-171 controls, and dive into that. And then you also realize, I don't even have enough people on staff that know about this to be able to help me. So can you explain, sort of as a business owner and from somebody who owns an MSP that's gone through this, when I mention education, what were those hurdles that you had to jump through? Right.
So, for some of y'all that can see the door, I made that door myself. The desk right here, this desk right here, I made this myself. I have done amateur carpentry, and I consider myself okay at it. I've got all the tools in the garage to prove it, right? I could always use some more tools. I could always use more space. But if you asked me to build a house, I'd say not no, but heck no, right? I don't have the required education to build a house. I could use all the tools that I could use to build a house, but I could not build a house. And I think a lot of times MSPs and other organizations, especially larger MSPs that have, CSIPs, CISSPs, CISMs, other people that have years of technology and consulting, and they've done other types of PII and other types of, we've got this, we can do it. Yep, this is no problem. I'll read the NIST guidelines and we can build this thing and I got this. No, you don't. You don't have it. That experience does not translate very well. You need to get your CCP and CCA. It is a different thing. You've got to understand how it works. I can't tell you how many people I've seen fall into the trap. Yes, you'll be the exception, but guess what? You won't. Right? Everybody believes that, I can go 100 miles an hour and I won't get a ticket, but it sucks when you do. So, and in the state of Florida, you go to jail now. So don't be that. So just believe in your humanity and just do yourself a favor and go get the real education. Go get your CCP and CCA. I can't tell you how many people, because I teach the CCP now and I can teach the CCA now. I just passed my CCA a little while ago. I sat the course over a year ago and just did not take the test. So I finally did it. But I've been an instructor for a while. So
I had a kid in the middle of you
Right.
going through the course
Going
and then
through that.
deciding to take the test.
Yeah.
Like we're a child.
So, and I've talked to so many students that have, the moment they go through the CCP, the first thing they do, go home. What do when they go home?
They throw out their SSP.
They throw out their SSP. People that have years of technology experience, because once they go through and understand more about the ecosystem, about what they're really getting into, they're like, oh crap, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to work. I've seen it time and time and time and time again. So that education piece is so critical. Do not trick yourself into believing you're that smart. Just realize, because I did too, I threw out my SSP like 4 or 5 times. Okay, so join the team if you do it. So sit the CCP, sit the CCA, go through it, get in the ecosystem, attend the conferences, listen to people that are much, much smarter than you in the industry. Not that they're smarter people, but they're just smarter and had more experience in that. It is different.
Yeah.
Understand that. Because I thought, well, I've got all this years and years of MSP experience. I can just waltz in here and translate that beautifully, and we can just make this sucker work. And I could not have been more wrong. And I have seen too many MSPs get caught in the trap, and sadly, too many OSCs that have got caught in the crossfire because of that. That people come to us with like, hey, our MSP just totally failed us. I mean, they're trying. We love these guys. We've been with them for years, and they're doing their best, but we got obligations and timelines, and we just can't hit it. And we look at their stuff and it's atrocious. And these people have years of experience of cybersecurity and other stuff, but they just don't get it when it comes to CMMC. So that education piece, you've got to understand the experience you have is like the amateur carpentry when it comes to CMMC. You've got to really invest the time to understand what building a house around CMMC really looks like.
Mm-hmm. And I think we need to speak just a little bit to the business owners of the MSP as well that's listening to this. That does mean more dollar signs to those people.
Yeah,
so
they cost money.
They cost more money, and keep that in mind.
Because you got to think about, okay, am I going to go try to headhunt somebody that's got this experience already? There's not a ton of them out there right now.
Right.
So that's going to be a premium.
So that means premium. Yep.
Or you can try to home grow it. Take someone that's got CISM. Yeah. If you have those types of experience and certifications and other, maybe you have ISO, whatever, and maybe it's 853 and you've done, FedRAMP or FISMA experience, or you've had RMF, right? Stuff like that. You've got experience in those. Those don't translate perfectly to what you're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. It's different. In fact, sometimes we've had people that come from RMF experience and can't pass the CCP because they can't figure out how to dumb it down to make it kind of fit through the 171 kind of door, right? Because it's different than what they're used to. So those are just things, and that has an impact on your ability to pass. So you just really need to, like what you're saying, think about the educational cost and plan on how you do it, because those are the people who are going to help you build your architecture and design to build off of, right? And if they don't have the skill set, they don't really truly understand, then guess what you're going to build? Something's going to fail.
Something
right?
That's worth crap. Yeah.
Right.
And here's another thing that I think is another layer to this. If you are an MSP, you have multiple technicians that are supporting your help desk, that are supporting your clients' IT needs on a daily basis. Those people need to be trained on how to use whatever you've created for those CMMC clients, which, like Bobby said at the beginning, will not or should not be the same that you use for your commercial clients. So with that being said, the education piece doesn't even stop when you hire those new people to build all this stuff. You have to be able to educate your team. That's also where I see the problems come up in other MSP and owners' heads when I start describing that stuff. They realize, oh, I'm going to have to teach all of my team about this, and they're only going to have to do it for 2 clients.
Right.
Like, are they even going to remember how to do that if they're just doing it for 2 clients? You see where it starts to a little bit unravel there.
Yeah, we've made so many mistakes where we tried to use some technology that was for that 1 or 2 clients. They get mad because the one person that knows it isn't on call that day.
They're on vacation. They're in Cabo.
Right.
They're going to be there for like 2 weeks. Yeah. Exactly. So just keep that in mind as well when talking about education. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is scoping and design. When you're talking about scoping and design, you like to describe it as there's two pieces to this. There's yours and there's the client's.
Right.
And then how you connect. Right. So do you want to explain that to people and what you kind of had to go through with your environment and standing that up versus the clients?
Yeah, I would say this is an area where people could feel maybe I'm being a little controversial in my perspective of how to approach it.
Okay, so put your hand up. Don't claim CMMC Jesus.
I'm not
And don't put your
claiming
hand on the
claiming
Bible.
that. No.
Yeah.
But it is my belief that if you're going to support clients in the CMMC space, you need to have a safe space to support them from.
Right.
So that means you have to design a system that's qualified at parity. In other words, at a CMMC level 2 level, whether you get it assessed or not, that's up to you. But it needs to have parity that can match the client. So what does parity look like? So that means that you need to have at least a system security plan, the matrix, the other components, the training. You basically need to go through building an environment for the client, but it's relevant for you and how you can support them. So you've got to really think about how you're going to build that environment. And your environment that you're going to support them out of is probably going to be to somewhat different than how your clients are going to be, right? There might be some specific tools you'll have to self-host. What RMM are you going to use, right? You've got to think about the tool sets that you're going to use, because the tool sets can literally punt you out of phase 1 in a microsecond, right, Kaleigh?
Yeah, that was the other thing that I was going to bring up too is, which I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of like choosing to create this new environment, and where some people get a little bit off bases when they're an MSP owner and I tell them this information is a lot of the time the tools and having to teach the technicians on those new tools to be able to use them. It also can, just like what you're saying, in an assessment perspective, it can completely screw over your client and you won't even get out of phase 1. And so not only is it going to be difficult for you as an MSP to teach your, technicians and your team around you what is new and what you're going to be doing in this new environment, but also to make sure that this environment, this new environment, is up to par with CMMC Level 2 standards, and you're not going to accidentally fail your client out of phase 1 is a whole nother scary, I would hope would be scary for you, that you wouldn't want to happen perspective.
Yeah, you got to really think about that as you're doing, because as you go to pick your tools, let's just pick something almost all MSPs have. And that's their RMM tool, right?
Yeah,
so their
it's a great
remote
example.
management system that they're going to have that allows them to talk to the client, support it, probably handle remote desktop sessions, right? So it have
to go into a
some type of
machine to help
screen,
fix something.
screen access capabilities, probably backstage capabilities of like executing commands, looking at registry keys, making changes to the system
Files,
remotely
push
without,
files. Yeah.
transferring of files, logging of information on the systems, pushing patches, other things like that. That RMM tool is extremely powerful. Usually it's an agent that they install on the system. And so that tool alone can absolutely bring you to scope, right? So if you're an MSP, you put the RMM tool on the client, boom, and you go in the assessment and the assessor's like, okay, so what do you qualify in phase 1? They say, what do you qualify yourself as? We're like, oh, we're a security protection asset. If you don't understand what a security protection asset is and you're an MSP trying to get in the space, probably should.
Go back to
So yeah, definitely need to know those things. So let's say you just qualify yourself as someone that's just providing the security mechanisms for them. And they're like, cool. So how do you support the client? We use Screen Connect. And you're like, okay. So you use Screen Connect. So can you do file transfers with Screen Connect? Well, yeah. Okay. Does it do screen sharing? Yes, it does. Okay. Where's that hosted? Well, we didn't want to host it ourselves, so ConnectWise hosts it. Okay, so that's a third party, right? Yeah. Do they have people outside the U.S.? Yes. Does your organization operate with ITAR? Yes. So no U.S. citizens, even though those are non-U.S. citizens, have access to that container. Well, yeah. You're just like, oh my gosh. The assessor just wants to jump out a window. Because the tool that you picked allows file transfers. There's no limitation for you to do it. You're not prepared to negotiate that, how you might remediate that, right? just because the tool has the capability doesn't mean that you're dead in the water if you have mitigating control ways to control and protect it, right?
Yeah, you can set up barriers around
You can set up barriers, right?
You have to know to
ways,
set them up.
right. You got to know where those are. That's why we like to use Ninja One for us, their FedRAMP offering. So with FedRAMP, this is why understanding the ecosystem is really important. If you use a FedRAMP tool that is authorized, some of those components can be inherited. In other words, during the assessment, if you say we're using these things, there's a proper way of doing it, which is outside the scope of this podcast. You can do it safely and you won't get called out on the carpet through some of those concerns. So those are the kinds of things you need to think about when you're picking those types of tools. And that's where the experience comes in. If you don't have that, you're just going to try your best, which is great, but sometimes you can try your best, it ain't going to be good enough. You can ask me to dunk a basketball, and I will try my best, but it ain't getting dunked. So,
oh my gosh, I'm just picturing you trying to dunk a basketball.
I can barely touch the net, girl. Like, it's got worse. The heavier I've gotten, the less vertical I've got.
I do want to clarify something though, because I talked to a group of MSPs about tools, and I mentioned Ninja One is a great example of their FedRAMP authorized product, and they were like, yes, we use Ninja One. Yes, that's great. I was like, not that one though.
Right. The one you're on is not the FedRAMP one. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, you're gonna have to buy that. You're gonna have to buy a different version of Ninja One to be able.
That's what we did. We ended up having to get. We've got our FedRAMP version and we've got our commercial version. And the FedRAMP version is quite a bit more expensive. And guess what? That's the trend in the industry. So this goes back to knowing the game that you're about to step into play. All the licenses for everything is just freaking more expensive. Why? Because compliance ain't cheap.
Yeah.
So just know that when you come in.
Yeah.
Be braced for impact.
You got to be thinking about if you have like a security, device suite that you're charging your clients or whatever that is, you might have to be rethinking that if you're looking at the price for each one of these products that are FedRAMP authorized.
And that's a thing that this goes back to the knowledge piece. That's the thing why a lot of MSPs struggle is when they step in this space. Well, how much do I charge? I don't know really what my total time, because in a traditional peer, kind of like pi would be like pi as far as in the math equation, like kind of a constant, right? Is that half an hour per user per month is what you would expect time for an engineer to spend on a user. And that's just one of many types of general calculations you can kind of do to kind of get a general idea of what the cost would be to support a specific client. Throw all that out when you're doing CMMC, because none of those math equations work. So you've got to think about, because there's maintenance approaches that have to do with CMMC requirements that you don't have to do in the commercial space. So it just blows up the cost calculations quite a bit. So you have to then start to really sit down and think about your architecture and design, and then you can back your way into what those costs are. So then you can figure out what your prices are, because you got to find out what your costs are before you can do your prices. But if you just throw your prices without having any idea of how you're doing your costs, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yes, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about tools. I want to talk about the documentation piece specifically. When you've thought about how you're going to scope yourself in, what your scope is going to look like personally as an MSP, as well as how you're going to connect your clients and how you're going to build, their tenant and where they live as well. You also had to think about the documentation piece. Now, I want to speak to two parts of documentation. One, you obviously have to build your own documentation. There's the requirements that are actually stated in the CAP for an external service provider to have when coming into an assessment. And then there's the things that you actually should have as an external service provider, okay? So I don't think in any way what the CAP has stated and those three items that it kind of speaks to should be the only things that you think about. And dear God, if they are, you are already screwed. Because all they say in the CAP for an external service provider like us, that's what an MSP is qualified under, is a customer responsibility matrix, right? Which people always hate that it's called customer responsibility matrix, because it's really a shared responsibility matrix. It's what you're in charge of as far as the NIST 800 171 controls go versus what your client is in charge of versus what you guys kind of share together, and it lists all that out, okay? And then it also talks about your agreements together and how they speak to 32 CFR, how they speak to NIST 800 171 controls. Like, you know, they want to see like, oh, if you fail this assessment, you know, here's kind of how this works. Probably they want to see you mention your customer responsibility matrix somewhere in there as well, and what you speak to, and the risk involved. There's a lot of risk involved. So, you know, you're connected to the OSC. And so those are the two main documents, and it does kind of talk to an SSP as well, and like how you fit
that being
into
the
their
third thing
SSP.
that you would want to be prepared to bring, right?
But it doesn't necessarily say like that the external service provider has to have their own entire SSP sort of thing.
Yeah. But you better.
But you do.
Yeah, you better.
But you do. You know, when you're talking about all of this, you realize there's this piece of the puzzle of like what I have to have prepared. But then also, if you're going to be helping your clients through this, you're also going to help them create theirs, right? So they don't know what you're doing to build their tenant necessarily. So you're going to be speaking to them of, well, I honestly don't know what you're going to do, really. But I'm going to guess maybe what you're going to do, which is like you're going to talk with them and explain, we're doing these things, so this is how you would write it. But, you know, if you don't have the education piece like we talked about before, you don't really know how to write their SSP as well. So you start to see where it gets a little bit jumbled up. But all in all, there's your documentation, and there's also the documentation that you're helping your clients with.
And you don't know what they would do. You're meaning like if they were trying to wing it, you don't know how they do it, because you know how we do it.
I just don't know what they would do if they're winging it personally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really a good point, because something I didn't touch about necessarily is you want to build your tenant to support your clients, right? So that infers that you sit down, you've got the knowledge, you understand the tools, you architect that out, and then you got to think about, all right, now what are the scenarios we're going to support these clients in? Are we going to support Linux? Are we going to support Mac? Are we going to support AWS? Are we going to support Google? You know, are we only going to do Microsoft? Like, you've got to think about where your go, no go to support the clients. And you've got to kind of define your avatars of the different situations. We're only going to do enclaves. We're going to do hybrid situations. We're going to do physical infrastructure and, you know, manufacturing and other components, and we'll bring in their cloud solution. And you've got to map all that, figure out what what's acceptable, because what you don't want to do is kind of march through, talk them into saying, yes, I don't care, get them in the boat mentality, and then just figure it out as you're going along. And you're just going to have this spaghetti network that is going to have no chance of scale, and it's going to be a real disaster. So you've got to really think what's yes and what's no, and then build around how you're going to support that. Well, it's the same way for your documentation. You've got to build the documentation for your environment so that it can pass the assessment. So if you want to get level 2, which I highly suggest you do, then build it to get assessed. The nice thing about it is if you get your stuff assessed, then conceptually what you start to design off of for your clients, now you've got validation for the templates that you're starting to base off of that you're working with clients, which is what we did, which was a really smart play. One of the things that I was really glad that we did, and it has served us very, very well, we were able to get a really good idea of what right looks like for our architecture and design. We had the avatars that we wanted to have for our clients. We started building those documentations, which were derivatives of how we had done it. So we felt really good that, okay, if this was right, then these things should also equally be right. We weren't starting from just brand spanking new type of stuff. And then we wrote those documents in such a way that they talk to each other so that we could be their support mechanism. Because we see as the MSP, our responsibility is to protect the client as best they can through the assessment to pass. Yeah. So we want to be responsible and take as much of the appropriate matrices responsibilities. In other words, there's 320 assessment objectives. We want to take as many of those as we feel is appropriate for us to handle, and then crush it for them so they don't have to worry about it as much, and speak to it during the assessment. The other ones, like physical controls, like I'm not going to escort their guests, right? I don't have that. I'm not going to be able to handle their thumb drives as they move around and do different components. So like when you have to deal with chain of custody of CUI, when they're printing stuff, you know, we can layer on technical components to assist, but there's going to be parts that are always going to be the client's responsibility. They've got to do their own background checks and how they're going to do those things. I can't enforce that. They have to. So those will always be the client's part. So there's always going to be some of what they're going to be talking about. You can't do all of it. But when you start to think about that, then you start creating that documentation that starts to, we call it shashimono. So it's Japanese woodworking, which perfectly seams together. It's just a term that we use internally just to kind of help us emphasize how we have to work together and make it fit. Because if it's like, then it's not going to go well for the assessment, and it's incredibly difficult. Right. Anything that you do at 100% level, right? Anything you try to do, like even if you were doing like server uptime, right? 99% is great, but if you take 99% over 365 days, like you've got weeks of downtime you can do, and that's like easy. But so they say 5 nines, right? So 99.99, that's when it starts getting incredibly difficult as you add more nines on. And that's how CMMC is. As you're adding lots of nines on there for that efficiency's sake, and it takes a lot of planning and effort to get to that level. Yeah. And when you want to do it at scale, you've got to think about it from the start.
Yeah, that's so true. So, once you think about how you're going to do it at scale, you start to prepare your documentation. Now it's the actual execution of it and the staffing that it takes to be able to execute it. Before we close today, I want to talk just a little bit about that piece, because it's all real life, but this is also very real life to us of like, we're living it right now, of continuing to make sure that we do that properly and have the right amount of staff and the right type of technicians and the right type of people doing the right things. And, it's no joke. So do you want to speak to that just as a business owner, of an MSP and what that takes to pull off as well?
Yeah. I mean, what was one of the big reasons why I brought you on as the COO of the company now? I mean, I didn't do that because that was cool. There was a reason why I did that. What was a big reason?
You couldn't be in all the places at once.
Yeah. Just handling the growth that we have and the CMMC focus that we're having to do and trying to make sure each department has all the right knowledge and the skills to be successful at that role that they're doing. And then boiling it down at the right levels of having the skill sets, right? You can't have CCAs everywhere in your organization. That just doesn't work. So you've got to build structure and train your team and build it so that you can have success at each of their knowledge levels they're at. And that's a big challenge that you've undertaken, right? That you're going to have to help us go through and make sure that we're implementing organizationally wide. Because
imagine if you just told me that on the podcast.
Congratulations, honey. That's your new responsibility. Way to go, my daughter.
Okay, and that's it for today.
Yeah, that's it. It's a massive challenge. And as I was going through trying to make sure, working with all of our leadership and departments, I was like, as we were growing, I'm like, I need somebody to help really focus in on this component. And that's the reason, one of the big reasons that we help move you in there is because as we grow and stand up new departments, that will always have to happen. Mm-hmm. As you go to do different things, like that level of maturity, it's just CMMC requires it in order for you to be able to make sure you're hitting all of those things.
Right.
So the staffing is challenging. I remember we were at PAX 8 Beyond.
Last year?
Yeah, last year. You weren't there then. That was
I
was a really cool conference. It's a beautiful location. It's just so pretty. But I was approached by a guy who's like, we listened to you guys talk about CMMC and your presentation. We're just going to buy someone because we think this is going to be too hard. I was like, okay, let's talk about that. I was like, there's probably maybe 10 MSPs that would fall in the category that would be worthy of you purchasing, because that's like, they're more of a traditional MSP, help desk and all that fun stuff, of which probably half of them are just starting off. Right. So even if you bought something you had, they're really, yes, they do have their level 2 and they're much further down the path, but they still don't have the scale thing figured out. Right. Yeah. That's the biggest challenge of any MSP that's getting into that market. And then you've got the Summit 7s, M&S group that's been around for a while, other peoples that are much larger that have been doing this space for a very, very long time. They're taken off. They have no desire to,
Is that
to
his
do.
tip to you to try to buy you?
Yeah. He was kind of sort of, I'm like, and I'm not selling because I love what I'm doing. And I mean, what the heck else am I do? And we're growing, like we're taking off. The organization's growing. I mean, it's a great opportunity. This is a good market to step in, but you got to know what you're doing and you got to know what tiger you've got by the tail. And I was like, look, there's just a handful of companies out there that you could talk to. I could give you some introductions, but good luck on the sales of that. And he's like, he just thought he would just go find one and just buy them like
500 that's there.
Yeah, like no, they don't exist
there's
right
not
now.
500.
And it's the same way for your staffing, right? There's just not a lot of those people out there. So you're gonna have to teach your people. You're gonna have to turn inward and really pour into your staff if you really want to do this thing well.
Yes.
Because you just can't go out and hire tons of these people that have this skill set. There's just not enough of them.
Wow, you never told me that story. That's an eye-opening story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really do hope that this conversation was, hopefully helpful to MSPs out there, but also just to anybody who's working as a part of an MSP that's trying to work towards this. You're maybe a technician on staff, or even if you're a person at an OSC that's like the IT guy that's doing this, to let you know, like, hey, you're not alone of just trying to do this by yourself. It's not possible. Like, look at these companies that are trying to do it, just them as a company, and you're tasked as one person. It is no joke. We do have...
And we did it, as an MSP. We went there and did it. It's not easy.
Yeah,
right?
it's possible.
And it's not a speed run.
Yeah.
We did it, but just know that you're in for quite a journey. And we basically stood up a whole new company to be able to do this thing. I mean, we didn't like an LLC perspective, but we had to stand up a whole separate infrastructure and structurally and do that. And so you need to really understand, if you're wanting to do this at scale, that's kind of what you're looking down the barrel if you really want to do it right. And so that's, I think, part of what's difficult for MSPs is they're stepping in. They don't understand that's kind of what it is. But for some, they're like, this sounds great. I want more of that. Well, then, we're going to be at different conferences. Check out the events page.
MSP GeekCon,
Yep.
all that stuff. So
we'll talk to you about it, CMMC. I got the shirt. I'll talk to you all day about it.
We're going to have some really cool shirts at our next conference too. So that's going to be fun. Just like Bobby was saying, check out our events page on our website. We listed where we're going to be, so you can come talk to us and check us out. But also too, if you ask us to sit down for an hour or two and pick our brain, we are going to send you this podcast episode that we just talked about, because we would talk about this exact thing. We're a pretty open book on here. We're the same in person as we are on here, so this is what we talk about. So thanks for listening this far, if you are this far in. But we hope you guys enjoyed not only this episode, but this season, because we're closing it out. So we hope
it's a good one to end on.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed season 4. We have a new theme for season 5. We've got some pretty cool stuff in store. Some pretty cool people that we're trying to get on the podcast. So I'm really excited for season 5. I think it's going to be good. We're getting back to the basics. We're going to get down to people that are actually implementing this and the struggles that we're seeing, just from different perspectives. Whether you're a C3PAO trying to implement this, whether you're that one IT person in a company that's been tasked with this on their first day on the job, or you are an MSP that is trying to do this, all different types of perspectives. So,
and just a little tidbit there, like, I think you're going to find out there's going to be a chunk of C3POs that just disappear in the next year or so. And the reason why they're going to disappear is they aren't prepared to really pass the ISO certification, and the cost and the commitment to do that, plus the CMMC, they're sort of struggling and keeping it, and they're just going to disappear. And I think that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to when we have some of the C3POs on to talk about what that possible reality is going to look like.
Yes.
Wow, that'll be a fun conversation to have.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this season. Stay tuned 2 weeks from now when we start season 5. But we'll be posting about that information on our LinkedIn, on our YouTube. So please make sure to follow us on there if you want to know when the new episodes are being posted and uploaded. Until next time, guys, as always, keep on climbing. See ya. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.